Welcome. Okay, all right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Grant Vanessian. I'm with Baker and McKenzie here in New York. And it's my tremendous honor, privilege, to introduce you my friend Eugenio Hernández-BRETÓN. Eugenio is a partner in the Caracas office of Baker. And I worked together over the years. And you'll hear about some of the cases that Eugenio has worked on. Eugenio, I like to tell people, is the best educated lawyer at Baker McKenzie. Which includes an LLM here at Columbia Law School, and a doctorate from Heidelberg, an LLM from Strasbourg, a German LLM, Tübingen, how do you pronounce that? Tübingen, okay. Fluent in many languages, many cultures. I've had two people in my life come up to me and tell me that you are the best lawyer in Venezuela. And he's also the nicest person that I know. I'll give you Eugenio Hernández.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thanks to Grant, Javier, and Maria for the invitation, and to the organizers as well, to Columbia Law School. Thank you very much. Well, I have prepared this lecture for you all. Thank you for attending, which from what I've seen, the lecture here, this series, this is going to be somewhat, I would say, different and unusual maybe. So, well, let's see what I have prepared. I also invite you along the way to interrupt me if you may have any questions, okay, or comments. Because I mean, from the title of the presentation or the lecture, you will may guess that this is not only about investment arbitration. It is also about investment in general and sustainable investment as well. So most particularly about the specifics of a country, my country, Venezuela. And this is the agenda. It may seem to be long, but it is not. And you will, I have brought some pictures for you to illustrate this presentation. I am setting the beginnings some 20 years ago, or I say or so because it may go a little bit before, but it's a good way to start, just to take a look at how this thing of investment arbitration began in Venezuela. So 20 years ago or so, investment arbitration was not an issue in Venezuela. So what I could say is Venezuela joined the ICSID Convention in 1993, and it came into force in 1995. And the first series of bids were negotiated in the early 1990s. Since then, Venezuela has entered into some 20-something BITs with a very different range of countries, but not with the USA, for example. It was negotiated, and there were serious efforts in those negotiations, but it never came to a successful result. In the 1970s, Venezuela went through a nationalization process in two important industries: the oil and iron, two of the basic natural resources of Venezuela. And those nationalizations, which at that time made a lot of noise, were successfully managed from a negotiation standpoint. So negotiations were followed with the different actors at the time, and they got paid, no claims, nothing beyond a successful negotiation. The Venezuelan government took, or the Venezuelan state took control in 1975, 1976, and that was part of Venezuelan recent history. And we could say that up until 1998, there was a friendly attitude towards private investment and foreign investments in Venezuela. In the 70s, Venezuela joined the what we call the Andean Pact, the Andean Community of Nations, and well, that was, let's say, like the framework for foreign investments in Venezuela. And even in 1998, in December of 1998, when President Chavez won his first term, the future planning minister in respect of foreign investments and foreign investors said what I call, well, the head of the planning minister, because he said, well, when foreign investors know about our policy towards foreign investments, we will have so many that we will have to take, I will have to take my hat off and, you know, try to move them away, because there will be so many, plenty of foreign investors in Venezuela. That's what he said, and that's recorded. This is not an invention of mine. And also, the Chavez, right the day before he was elected, he said, well, we need foreign investors, and we will keep our policies, or the Venezuelan policies, Venezuelan existing policies in respect of the IMF, the World Bank, and all of that. By 1998, we only had 2 investment arbitration cases. Well, it's not FedEx, it's FedEx. FedEx and Alcoen, the 2 cases. I was involved in the Alcoen case, which was the second investment arbitration in Venezuela. And we achieved a successful result, but I will talk about that later, because you could say, well, it wasn't that successful, but it was successful. And Chavez got elected, so that's 20 years ago or so. But then, what do we have? So this is government policies in a petro state, oil-dependent economy. Venezuela is close to 100% dependent on oil. I would say 95 to be short, but let's say 95%. And what's the recipe for government policy? Well, first of all, so it's statism and populism, and that's based on what? On the enormous resources, financial resources for the state stemming out of the oil industry. And of course, that led to nationalizations in the most recent years. So, because the oil prices went up so high, that led a lot of to a high income for the Venezuelan government. And the Venezuelan government decided, well, what do we do with all of these earnings? And well, let's begin and using these funds. But the funds went somewhere else, and the government was forced to currency devaluations. Exchange controls were imposed since 2002, although the government says that those controls, exchange controls, were lifted a month ago, which is not entirely true, to my regret. Price controls, we have been living in an economy characterized by price controls on every single item you may think of, and the government entered into a number of what I call lavish state contracts. State contracts that were to the detriment of the national industry. Rather than helping the national industry, it was a help to foreign investors, which were producing or providing the services that Venezuelan firms were providing at that time. All of this led to massive social handouts. That means a lot of people, because of the layoffs, because of the reduction of the size of the economy, people without job resorted to social handouts. So the government decided to start a number of different programs and giving away a number of items, from food to medicine to private insurance even, to private insurance. Rather than building public hospitals, they resorted to private insurance companies and paying for health care at private medical institutions. Well, again, oil boom was fueling the state, and if you happen to be a good friend of the government, well, you were in the right place, because that led to a number of a huge amount of possibilities of doing businesses with the government and getting your pockets full of money. Corruption rose to levels never seen before. I'm not saying that before there was not corruption. There was, of course, but not to the levels that we have seen more recently. And the result is anti-business policies and a number of measures that have driven a number of private investors, foreign and domestic, away. Price distortions. This time in Venezuela, it is difficult to predict and to know if the price of an item, if a soda, if the price they are charging to you, it is too high or too low. I mean, it's very difficult to know, because we are fighting against scarcity in respect of consumer goods, any type of consumer goods, medicine, difficult to obtain, agricultural stagnation. So Venezuela used to get a lot of its own supply from Venezuelan land, so to speak. But no. So that led to food shortages. Of course, black market. And there are people specializing in black market transactions because they know where to find the stuff, where to find the most basic goods. The public sector payroll rose to a figure never seen before. Capital flight, we talk about 400,000 billion US dollars going somewhere. Probably some to the United States, but everywhere. So, productivity down to the minimum. Deindustrialization, that also led to sudden shutdown. In the most recent times, you've seen U.S. companies like Clorox, for example, in a sudden shutdown. They decided to close their plants in Venezuela and simply leave the country and leave their assets behind. As easy as that. Okay? And then more and more nationalization, hyperinflation. The predictions by the end of the year is 4.5 million% inflation. What's the difference between 4.5 million and 1 million and 500,000? I really do not know, but I mean, it's and of course, poverty. That's the results. These are very recent pictures, what you see here. Very recent pictures. And this is why the title of this presentation. So how is the Venezuelan economy right now? Or how's the country? It's trapped between a wall and an empty shell. That's what you see. And if you see here, this is cereal. You see 1, 2, 3 lines, and then it's empty at the back. So you have here plenty of cereal to buy. That's what you get. And sometimes what you see is, I don't know, there's some Coca-Cola over there. Well, that's it. But that's the day for Coca-Cola. This is the cereal day, and that's it. And this water, and that's it. Well, I'm going to leave this for a second. This is people looking for food. What do you see here? And if it happens, how do I play here? This is video? Yeah. Okay. You want to tell me what this is? That's chicken.
Were you standing in the witness agreements?
One, that's it. How do I get out of here?
I think if you just click next, it should take you to the next
Okay,
slide.
okay, fine. That was at a state-owned supermarket, which was nationalized. It used to be owned by the casino group, the French group in Venezuela, and it was nationalized. And that video was filmed one day that all of a sudden, plenty of people were there, and frozen chicken came in. They were trying to get chicken to get in line to pay for the chicken. This was not looting. They were trying to get their stuff and paying for it. But that's price-controlled chicken. That's why. You see? If this were black market, no problem. But this is price-controlled chicken. Okay? Well, fine. The thing is that all of this also brought into an enormous amount of expropriations. And people so expropriation has been regulated in Venezuela since 1942, okay? And we happen to have expropriation like anywhere in the world, particularly for the construction of infrastructure, highways, ports, airports, well, whatever, hospitals, for example. But then expropriation became the main state policy. And everybody began to talk about expropriation in Venezuela. And everybody began to talk about who's going to be the next one under expropriation. Who's going to be suffering an expropriation measure? Again, because of the oil income was so high, then this led to a very strong expropriation policy, which were mostly arbitrary because they decided not to expropriate because the assets were affected to a given project of social interest, for example. But the expropriations were directed at specific persons. Okay? So, depending on who you were, and depending on and whether you were close or not to the government, then you could be the subject of an expropriation measure. And it became then a matter of political sanction. So they were punishing you by way of an expropriation measure. And you could read in the whereases in a number of expropriation decrees where they say, well, because you were engaged in certain practices which are in violation of the law without any due process, without any right of defense or anything like that, they simply decided, because you were engaged in this, in my view, I, the president, then you are expropriated or subject to expropriation. But not all expropriations were conducted in the same or following the same pattern. In some way, in some cases, so they force you by way of an expropriation decree. In some other cases, they force you to negotiations and to agree into some price. Like, for example, Banco Santander, the Spanish bank, was the majority owner of one of the oldest banks in Venezuela, called Banco Venezuela. It happened to have the wrong name, Banco de Venezuela. And Santander was trying to sell its shares in Banco Venezuela to some Venezuelan group. And that's subject to specific authorization from the, let's say, the banking agency in Venezuela. And of course, the president knew about this transaction and the application for authorization to transfer the shares. When he knew about that, he went on to TV and he said, look, they want to sell, and now we want to purchase, now we want to buy, but you have to sell it to me. And they forced Santander to sell to the Venezuelan government, because they say, how come Banco de Venezuela is going to be owned by some foreigners. It has to be owned by the Venezuelan state. So Banco de Venezuela, the largest bank in Venezuela, had the wrong name, and it became a state-owned bank. Okay? If you go to Venezuela right now and to go and see how is Banco de Venezuela doing, you're going to see that how the quality of the service and is suffering from that. That's an example. So, but for example, a number of measures, additional measures, work stability. For the last 7 years, there has been a prohibition against dismissals in Venezuela. For 7 years. Okay? For 7 years. You cannot dismiss anyone unless for some very serious grounds, and unless you get some authorization from the labor authorities. So what has happened? People do not want to hire anyone because you know that they're going to be protected by these work stability measures. Well, because of food security reasons, what do they say? Well, we need to take control over the entire agribusiness in Venezuela. And they took one of them, the most important group, which is owned by a Spanish group. And what happened? Well, then there is no agribusiness anymore in Venezuela. Well, some of the expropriations were for strategical reasons. Well, they decided we have to take control of all of those service providers to the oil industry in order to help the oil production. Dignified housing, well, that's so, like, you know, expropriating housing complexes and things like that. But the most, or the worst of all, is that in most of the cases, no compensation has been paid. The number of expropriations over the last, I would say, 15 years, it's in the thousands. In the thousands. And this is the formula. This is a book, a very interesting book, written by these two scholars, Corrales and Penfold. Penfold is the Venezuelan guy. Corrales is the American guy. Okay. No, it's, this is a very bright formula. You see. So all these measures put you on the spot, and they say, well, you're underperforming. Now I have to expropriate you. Now I have to nationalize your business. You see? In line, this is outside of this casino supermarket, the casino French group supermarket. Okay. People waiting in line for hours. Okay. Other measures of similar effects. They in early 1990s, early 2000, they issued, or the government passed, or had the Congress passing a law called the Lands Law, and they created an institution called the Recovery of Lands. So you have to evidence that you are that the ownership of a piece of land goes back without interruption before 1843. If not, then your lands go back to the state. Okay. And not using the lands law, but using some other piece of land, they expropriated golf courses, two or three golf courses in Caracas, in the city of Caracas, and they were wrong when measuring the area of one of the golf courses. And our house happens to be not exactly on the golf course, but close. And our house is included in the map of the area subject to expropriation. This happened more than 15 years ago, but nothing happened. But we are subject to expropriation, apparently. Okay. Because the expropriation law provided for a formal procedure which was not friendly enough to the government. Then the government had to resort to some other measures. For example, judicial measures of occupation and administration instead of ocupación previa. Ocupación previa means if it is so urgent, then the government has to, it could go to that way, so take the ocupación previa, but it has to deposit the amount of the price to be paid, at least the one that is, let's say, established in an anticipated way. But That was to put a lot of cash in a bank account. That doesn't work, and then they resorted to this type of judicial measures by way of a judiciary that is controlled by the government, and then violating the expropriation law. Well, or using some other legislation like consumer protection, the agribusiness sovereignty law, and also the labor law. All of these help in taking expropriations with the measures of expropriation without following the formal expropriation procedure. All sectors were hit by the government policy. And well, we were involved in this case, and the Caracas group, the coffee roaster. Imagine, so an expropriation decree which specifically identifies a trademark of the oldest coffee brand in Venezuela, dating back to the 19th century. Okay, and the main reason was that the president of Venezuela was a drinker of Café Fama de America. And that's it. That's the coffee roasting. So expropriation of a coffee brand, like Starbucks, let's say. And then you decide you have to expropriate Starbucks because Starbucks is a trademark necessary to serve the people of the United States, for example. Well, whatever. Radio, TV, press. Force transfers of ownership, but to the friends of the government. Okay? Because if you are a friend of the government, then, for example, the main two newspapers in Venezuela were El Universal, 100-year-old newspaper, and El Nacional, probably 70-some years old in Venezuela. El Universal, which was family-owned for 100 years, then it was sold to a group, unknown group. Now, El Universal, which happened to have some, let's say, position not that favorable to the government, now is very government-friendly. Some other group, another newspaper, very popular, called Últimas Noticias, the latest news, let's say. Well, now it is the newspaper of the government. And that was purchased by people related to the government. I understand they do not fear any expropriation measures for as long as they put in the front page what they know the government is going to like. And this is investment arbitration in Venezuela. You could say, well, what's the situation of the Venezuelan judiciary? What's your options? What are your options if you happen to have, let's say, if you happen to fight against an expropriation decree, if you happen to fight against the illegality of some measure taken under the Consumer Protection Act or the labor law or the banking law, whatever. So you have to resort to the judiciary. But let me just mention this briefly to you. The Supreme Court of Venezuela has several chambers. One of those chambers is especially established for the control of the legality of the acts of public bodies. Okay? But statistics show that in that chamber, political administrative chamber, 98% of the decisions are in favor of the government. Okay? And when you take a look at the other 2%, most of those are decisions which involve two government states. Okay? So what are your options? You go to the judiciary in Venezuela. Well, I used to be part of our group in Caracas that took care or takes care of the litigating against the government. Well, nobody does that anymore because, I mean, why pay attorney fees for a result you know is clear? And well, then people discovered the Netherlands Venezuelan BIT, which was one of the first BITs executed by Venezuela. It is quite formal. It was the best of the options in Venezuela, and people, for whatever reasons, decided to years ago, for tax reasons mostly, incorporate entities for their investments in one of the, let's say, Netherlands Antilles, like Curacao, Aruba, or San Martin, or even in the Netherlands itself, in Holland, and took advantage of this. And there were some cases decided in favor of the investors. But then the government found out that that was not a good business, and it decided that when the Netherlands Venezuela VAT was to its term was to run it was executed into force, came in 1993 for 15 years. 6 months before, the Venezuelan government sent a notice to the Dutch government saying we are not going to extend the term of the BIT. Okay, so it terminated in 2008, but because it has a sunset clause of 15 years, then it is still in force until 2023. Okay. But the thing is that no more, let's say, restructuring and things like that, and for taking advantage of the Netherlands Venezuela BIT. Also, in 2012, Venezuela denounced the Exit Convention, effective July 2012, and well. That means that we have a different stand now towards Exit Convention. There are some cases still ongoing because they began before they were filed and raised before the withdrawal came into effect, and or in some cases consent had been secured before the withdrawal or the effectiveness of the withdrawal. But let me point out this. In 1999, that means right at the beginning of the government, of the Chavez government, they passed a law for the promotion and protection of investments in general, private investments in general, particularly foreign investors. And there was an article there, Article 22, you're right, which was, let's say, in some way, it was the consent of the Venezuelan state to exit arbitration and, let's say, investment arbitration. And it was resorted in a number of cases, all of them in exit arbitration. In all of the cases, unsuccessfully. Okay. But even before the first ruling, the Venezuelan Supreme Court issued or rendered a decision saying that Article 22 was not consent by the Venezuelan government. Okay. But let me tell you the following. I follow that 1999 law. And the whole purpose of the entire law, and particularly of Article 22, was to provide consent for international arbitration. A friend of mine told me once, look, if you happen to have investment or foreign investment protection without international arbitration, it's like having a parachute without the silk. And that's the way it is. I mean, the whole 1999 investment protection law was a zero without consent to arbitration. Well, that law is not anymore in force. It was repealed and re-repealed, let's say, and now they have a law enacted last year, which is also in support of foreign investment and to provide for legal or juridical security, which in practice does no help to foreign investors or to foreign investment in Venezuela. So the issue of consent before and after Exit Convention, this is still an issue, a very important issue. Let me remind you of one case, which is quite interesting. This is the Venoclim case, Venoclim against Venezuela. Because Venoclim is let's say, a Dutch investor, which is owned. Venoclim has investments in Venezuela, in the, let's say, petrochemical sector. Not exactly that. Okay. And then Venoclim is owned by some Swedish company. And on top of that, there are some Venezuelans. individuals. Okay, and when they file for investment arbitration, they file under the Netherlands-Venezuela Treaty. Okay, no, excuse me. They file on the Article 22 of the 1999 investment protection law. And then they realized that there were some unfavorable rulings and awards, like working against consent by way of Article 22. And then they made a petition to add the Netherlands-Venezuela BIT. But that happened to be too late, because Venezuela had denounced the ICSID Convention in 2012. And their filing was beyond the date when the withdrawal was effective. And their case was thrown away. Okay? Lack of jurisdiction. Well, the Razones Personae jurisdiction for individuals, the issue of binationals is a hot issue. It's a hot topic. There are some very interesting cases pending now, mostly dealing with three brothers of Spanish and Venezuelan nationality. They filed separate requests for arbitration under the Spain-Venezuela Treaty, and those are still pending for decision. There has been some rulings, in one of them 2-1 in a non-suit proceeding, and they say, if you file under unsuit rules, you are not precluded from filing even if you are a binational, a dual national. Okay? And there's an issue in respect of one of the, in respect of the dissenting vote, because the dissenting vote stated that nationality or Spanish nationality was required at the time of the investment, not only at the time of filing the request for arbitration, not only at the time of when the violations of the BIT took place, or at the time of the rendering the award. So the time of the investment was also an issue here, and that went to a annulment in Paris, and the Venezuelan government won the annulment, or at least partially. So that's still ongoing. But investment arbitration is not for everybody. I mean, you may know that. I mean, they are. You have to pay lawyers like Grant, for example, or career. You see, and that's not for everybody. I was telling Grant an anecdote. We were with a group of Spanish investors in Venezuela, which were quite interested in knowing about the Spain-Venezuela BIT, and we explained, procedures, jurisdictional issues, merits, quantum, and all of that. But their main concern was, but how much is it? What are the figures? So how much will it cost me? And some say, well, I better find another way, unless you are, one of the big players. Choosing arbitrators. Venezuela loves to have French arbitrators. I won't say anymore. Legal, illegal. That's a huge topic. I mean, when we say the expropriation was illegal as counsel for claimants, if we say illegal, Venezuelan government would say legal. If we say legal, they would say illegal. And I mean, that's the story. And the issue of whether compensation, the lack of compensation, lack of payment of compensation, makes the expropriation illegal, it is an open issue. In most cases in which I've been involved, the lack of compensation makes it illegal. But I mean, that's quite a topic. And the most favored nation clause, particularly for procedural or to take advantage, consent, for example, trying to get consent. For example, in a number of cases, filing under the Barbados-Venezuela Treaty and trying to get consent via for example, the Ecuador-Venezuela BIT. That's been upheld by investment arbitration panels. Fair and equitable treatment, well, that's, I think, it never stays out of the picture. It's always, I mean, it's like going expropriation and violation of the fair and equitable treatment clause. Those are typical, let's say, grounds invoked for the merits in investment arbitration in Venezuela. Annulment and challenges, that's in every time Venezuela has lost a case, even in our long brief Café Pharma America case, an annulment or some other type of challenges. Because, as you could, or you may know or have read somewhere, enforcement of awards is it is a real problem. It's not easy. I mean, you have to first locate the issues and then fight against immunity, sovereign immunity issues, which makes things quite difficult. There's a case dealing with, well, let's see here. Up to now, there's been some 45 exit or additional facility cases, 4 uncitral cases, and you see, so the picture is not bad for the Venezuelan government. Okay? But let me tell you, among these cases, 4 cases are dealing with the same piece of land in Venezuela, a gold mine called Las Cristinas, that led to 4 investment arbitration cases. 4. And Venezuela won, I think, won 1 on jurisdictional grounds, and 3 of them against. And the amount of damages should be some 4 billion US in 3 cases. The same piece of property was taken from one, given to another, taken away, and given to another one and taken away. The same piece of land, Las Cristinas gold mines. And then the question at the end is, are BITs necessary for the encouragement and protection of foreign investments? Again, I think that this metaphor of the parachute without the silk is a good illustration. And I think that investment protection in Venezuela became such a huge issue because we don't have an independent judiciary, we have a very arbitrary government, and at least there was an option to go somewhere else and look for some redress. Okay? Well, I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Can we take a few questions?
Sure.
1 or 2 questions? Oh, lots of hands have gone up. Your hand went up first, so I'll let you go first.
Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, to what extent, according to you, the investment policies that have been applied prior to the Chavez period could have contributed to the current situation?
It is a very interesting question. I cannot say that the situation was perfect or ideal before 1998. And I think that there were some vices in the Venezuelan society that led to what we got. In particular, 2 things. An independent judiciary, and second, corruption. Okay? If you take a look at the World Bank investment, I don't know what you call it.
Doing business?
Well, so they say how easy or how difficult it is to do business in certain jurisdictions. Okay. Venezuela nowadays is in position, let's say there are 177, Venezuela is 174. Okay. So one of the most difficult places nowadays to do business. Before, there were some, difficulties for getting your permits, your authorizations, and all of that based mostly on corruption and the lack of an independent judiciary. Okay? So, on the paper, there were lots of advantages. There were good things. But there has always been some kind of, I would call it a resentment on the side of some politicians, okay? Because Venezuelan industry in general could have developed in an extraordinary way, okay, through oil. Venezuela was a very rich, or is still a very rich country, down the ground, okay? Down the ground. The thing is that the oil, gas, iron, gold, diamonds, and all of that should have helped the surface, the industrialization of the country. And that was the plan during the 60s and up to the 70s, up until 1972. In 1972 came the oil boom, the first oil boom. Venezuela became 5 or 6 or 10 times richer than it was before. And it made things quite easy for everybody. Okay? Not producing anything, simply importing. Okay? And that's the model which is still being applied by the Venezuelan government right now. Okay? So, the lack of industrialization of the country, the lack of an independent judiciary, and corruption, that's the basis of what we got.
You had 2 questions back to Rodolfo, and I think next to Rodolfo. So,
Yes.
sure. Go ahead, and then Rodolfo.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
You
sure.
take 2 more?
As many as you would like.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And I was wondering, is there any strategy how to enforce at the moment in Venezuela, or is it just that we wait until we hope that the government situation is like more stable?
I'm not a politician. I have some friends that are trying to do something, let's say, and I do not see any strategy. It's something like pray and wait, maybe.
So there is no enforcement at all of awards at the moment if an investor...
No, I mean, here in the U.S., let's say, let me tell you, for example, there have been a number of decisions, quite interesting decisions, allowing for the attachment of assets of the Venezuelan government. The CICO, so is owned by the Venezuelan government through PDVSA and the state-owned oil companies. And a federal court granted a measure to attach or seize and foreclose CICO assets in the U.S. But that forced the Venezuelan government to negotiations. And apparently they settled those situations with the award winners, let's say. And there's another quite interesting case. This is the Herna campaign case, a decision by the Supreme Court, by the U.S. Supreme Court of last year, I think. And Herna campaign is in the oil service industry, let's say. It's been in Venezuela for 60 years. And they were the owners of a number of assets in Venezuela. Those assets were taken over by the Venezuelan government. But Herna campaign held the assets through a Venezuelan subsidiary. So who was suffering the effects of the expropriation measures directly? The Venezuelan subsidiary. So, but the claimant here in the U.S. before federal courts in Washington, D.C. Was the U.S. company, okay? But at the end, they said it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said no, immunity of jurisdiction benefits the Venezuelan government, okay? Because they say, well, this is not an international expropriation, let's say, because the assets belong to the Venezuelan subsidiary. It is a domestic case, you have to litigate in Venezuela. Well, tell Helmer Campaign Venezuela S.A., the Venezuelan subsidiary, to go and litigate in Venezuela. I think that they don't even care in filing a claim before Venezuelan courts. They know they are lost.
We'll take the last question from Rodolfo.
And our
Tomas, okay, thank you for indulging. So we'll go to Rodolfo and then Tomas.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question about the trend in the results of the awards in all this arbitration against Venezuela. I wonder whether the investments were undertaken before the rise of Hugo Chavez in 1999 obtained federal awards compared to all the other investments that were undertaken just after the rise of Hugo Chavez. So whether you notice like a use of the concept of legitimate expectations for these investments. Mm-hmm. So whether this has been the key in resolving these cases over the years.
Well, there were only two cases before Chavez came to power: the FedEx and Alcoa cases. Okay, two. And but in respect of let's say the recent cases, or the most recent cases, of course, as the situation has turned to be worse in terms of an investment environment, this led also to a much lesser valuation of the compensation. Because as you can imagine, they say, well, if you happen to invest in Venezuela, once all these measures were known, you would have been crazy or close to crazy for investing in Venezuela. And also what we saw is that when Venezuelas Defense, the quantum issue in investment arbitration, one of the things they take advantage of is the Venezuela's country risk factor. And in some cases I've seen it's close to over 20%. Right. So over 20%. So Venezuela, on the one hand, is trying to promote investment in Venezuela, and on the other hand is telling people, don't be crazy and invest in Venezuela. Because look, we acknowledge that Venezuela is a 25% country risk for investors. You see? Are you from Brazil?
No, you don't.
No, but I just want to say something about Brazil. Venezuela, when Lula was in Brazil and Chavez was in Venezuela, both countries entered into a BIT. Okay? Venezuela ratified the BIT. Did everything on the Venezuelan Constitution, and also under the BIT, on the international law. Okay? Brazil did zero. Why? Because Brazil has a foreign policy against BITs. You see? And there's one.
Thomas, last question.
I wanted to ask how Venezuela defends itself on the merits and whether their strategy has changed. Because we've seen those pictures right now, and if an expropriation happened now or 2 years ago, you could perhaps go to the table and say, you know, we're like close to war, this is a state of necessity, and expropriations need to happen to clean up the mess. Have we seen a change of how Venezuela defends itself?
I don't have seen so far the state of necessity defense, like, for example, in Argentina, in the Argentinian cases. But mostly the defense is the same. I mean, all the measures were taken properly according to the rule of law, with full respect of all procedural guarantees. What happened was that you, as an investor, decided not to file or not to go to court or not to resort to the different legal avenues that the Venezuelan legal system allows. And basically also a strong defense on the quantum issue, because they say, well, your investment is worth zero, because, I mean, you invested or you knew what was coming and you took the risk, and you are responsible for taking the risk you knew were there before. Okay. But I haven't seen any significant change of the line of defense so far.
Or the issue, if you have resources in the ground, oil, gold, minerals, all right, that has a value that can be established. If you have a consumer product or anything that is depends on the economy as a whole, the investment is worthless, really. There's no way to do it with discounted cash flow because the company has lost a lot of money. So the quantum becomes very difficult in these businesses that do not involve resources in the ground.
Yeah, and then you have to play to the extent possible with exchange control issues, saying that the applicable exchange rate, because, I mean, at some point in time, exchange control are always a farce, unreal. Okay? Because you see, the difference between the official exchange rate and the, let's say, black market exchange rate is big. And if the amount of your expropriation in bolivars is, let's say, 100, and you say $1 is 100, at the black market rate, you're going to get 1. But if you say, look, the exchange rate is not 1 to 100, it's 1 to 1, then you're going to get $100. You see?
I was in Venezuela in 2009 with $200 in cash in my sock. Went into a sunglasses shop, and I got 8 bolivars on my dollar. Today, I guess I got 8,000 bolivars or more.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's a...
Just remove 5 zeros. From
So just one anecdote as well. So in August 23rd, they took away 5 zeros from the currency. Okay, so imagine 100,000 bolivars. The old 100,000 bolivars are now 1 bolivar. Okay, as an example. Okay, the price of gasoline. There are 2 types of gasoline. I'm going to talk about only the cheap one. Before, with the old bolivars, 1 liter was 1 bolivar. That means with 100,000 bolivars of the old ones, I could buy 100,000 liters. Now, with 1 bolivar, I could buy 100,000 liters of gasoline. It's that a way of a sustainable development policy in a country. Until 4 weeks ago, the Caracas subway system was for free because the cost of a ticket was, I don't know how many times what they were charging for a ride. So they decided not to charge anyone. For free. That's it. I mean, it's crazy policies. I mean, if the government, as a government, likes to have or to do something for the benefit of its people, I think this is not the way to do it, regardless of any ideological inclinations.
Can I invite everybody to give it up? Now, but if you had a few minutes, some of